And then he goes into yes.
More fun than how much it hurts.
Looking forward to it. I know. It's painful, but you'll be so happy.
I'll be out of town.
Okay, I'll just keep it then.
The doctor told me yesterday, he said, you have the highway, and you have the wheel ramp, but you have no tire left.
Did you buy a house now?
No, we're renting. Double rental.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good evening. I'd like to welcome you to the March 1st meeting of the Logan Municipal Council. Our opening ceremony this evening will be from Mike DeSimone, Community Development Director.
No words of wisdom, we'll just start with the Pledge of Allegiance.
Please stand up, Ben.
I love these staff openings.
I pledge of allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Gail, I just want you to know I think of you every single time I say the Pledge of Allegiance since you told us there was no comma.
I do too. And we all do it right.
So it's surprising how many people don't realize there isn't a comma. Our next item of business this evening is the acceptance of the minutes from our February 15th meeting and the approval of the agenda for this evening.
I sent Teresa Harris a couple of corrections, but with those, I would move for acceptance of the minutes and the agenda for this evening.
And you also had a couple of corrections?
Yes, which I've passed on to Teresa. Ernesto caught them, so I would second that.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Our regular meeting schedule is the first and third Tuesdays at 5:30. I think it's interesting that in February and March, we met on the 1st and the 15th. So that doesn't happen all that often, I believe. Number 5 on our opening agenda is our questions and comments for the mayor and council. If you have any questions or comments that you wish to share with us, please come to the podium. Make sure you have signed in and take 3 minutes or less, please.
Gail Yost. I had a friend asking me the other day, or notifying me the other day, that she didn't see any flags shown on the street for Martin Luther King Day nor on President's Day, and was wondering why there weren't any flags along the street. So I told her I would bring it up and find out, and that's what I'm doing.
Thank you very much, Gail.
Someone else asked that same question. Teresa, do you want to share the information from the city forester? Those flags are put up by the city forestry crew, and I mean, it basically had to, do with this time of year, particularly there's snow that makes it difficult to get their equipment in there, where they're just out for a day. I mean, it takes a lot of time and energy, so we choose specific holidays to do that. It was Memorial Day, we do the 4th and 24th of July, Veterans Day, and then again, we try not to do, we don't really do it during the winter just because of the problems. So we do some holidays, but we do not do every single one.
And yeah, it was just because of the snow and the curb and the areas they could not get to put the flags up.
I may pose the question, is the 24th more important for a flag than the President's Day?
Again, it's just very difficult
Because of the snow.
because of the snow and the time of year to put up.
Okay,
For their trucks to get to it.
just a question.
Flag Day.
We need heated flags.
Flag Day.
Flag Day is
June 15th, isn't it?
14th.
14th.
Yes, 14th.
I think that was on the list, yeah.
Anyone else have a comment or a question for the council that's not otherwise on the agenda?
Okay, hi, I'm Elise Carter. I'm here on behalf of the Logan Environmental Action Force from Logan High School. Over the years, this council has done a lot of great things in terms of investing in renewable energy. For example, creating the Renewable Energy and Sustainability Council in the early 2000s, and then voting in favor of the Clean Air Quality and Climate Change Resolution in 2016. But right now we're facing a difficult decision on whether or not to use more coal-generated power with the Enchant program. And on behalf of some of the young people in the community, I'm asking you not to invest the city in more coal-powered energy. The Logan City Renewable Energy and Sustainability Advisory Board strongly advises against entering into a power agreement with Enchant Energy, and while we greatly appreciate the council's efforts to increase renewable energy, greenhouse gas emissions have still continued to increase on both a global and local level in recent years. So as a resident of Logan and as someone who's going to have to live with the consequences of the decisions that we're making today, it's really important to me that Logan City does everything in its power to get greenhouse gas emissions as low as possible. So using coal for a little bit longer in the short term has been our policy for a long time, and it's becoming increasingly clear that this isn't sustainable. So we need to take a legitimate, assertive stand against emissions, and the first step is not entering into this agreement with Enchant Energy. So yeah, thank you for giving me the time to speak. I really hope you'll take my voice and the voice of people like me in the community into account.
Thank you very much. Make sure you've signed in on this sign-in sheet outside. I'm going to take 1 second and pull up the Planning Commission agenda for...
Aren't we considering another solar source today in workshop?
I don't know.
Yes.
Yes, we are.
And again, as you heard from the State of the City address, we either have bought into or are planning to sign power purchase agreements for 15 megawatts of solar, of which the last project, and we don't have a timeline yet, has 2.5 megawatts of that 5 that will be augmented by battery storage to sort of extend that. So again, it's just a real challenge right now to find base load power. I mean, we continue to add renewable wherever we can, so.
Yeah. What's our goal? I know we've talked about that in the past, where we want to be green energy wise in the future. What's that goal, Mayor?
And actually, the RESAB board, we 50% by 2030. We've essentially met that goal. Friday, the RESAB board is meeting, and we're actually discussing if we need to update that, sort of further augment that where we could go. So that actually will be discussed on Friday, and then I can report back to you at our next council meeting if you'd like.
That makes sense if we've already met that goal. It's like, let's set a new goal and try and do something different. So.
Exactly. So.
Thank you.
So Mayor, did you have anything else you'd like to say?
No, not tonight.
Okay, we'll move on to council business. The only item on council business this evening is a report on Planning Commission. Thank you for allowing me to pull up the agenda. The Planning Commission considered Lloyd Estates, which is a 7.23 acre subdivision into 44 single-family home building lots located at 200 West and 600 North in the traditional neighborhood zone. You might know that property right now as a place where horses have been for years and years, and a place where people sell potatoes from. They have some fairly substantial conditions that they have to meet in order to do that subdivision, but Planning Commission approved that with the conditions.
Was that one that, weren't they originally looking to switch it to multifamily?
They had originally, but they withdrew that application.
And so it's going to be single family?
It's going to be single family. The issues are
so that's
water.
That's not a rezone, right? Because it's already zoned that way.
Yes, it's already zoned NR6. And some of the issues are wetland and the number of exits and the viability of the exits and entrances to the property.
What's the name of it again?
Lloyd Estates. They also reviewed Cytiva's Logan expansion. That property is approximately 1725 High Clone Road in the industrial park zone. and they approved their design plan. They also had a design review for a new 12-plex at 261 East, 300 North. An older house will be torn down, and the property will be used for a 3-story, almost 6,000 square foot, 12-unit apartment building. It is in the zone. It is zoned for the use that was proposed. I'll say that the right way. And then last but not least, we will be hearing in a couple of weeks land development code amendment regarding park strips. So giving some alternatives for park strips in the city. And that is what happened at Planning Commission. So we'll move now to our action items. Our first action item is a public hearing on a budget adjustment. And I'm going to let Rich go over it just real quickly, and then I will open it to the public if there aren't any questions.
Two requests for appropriation, both by the Public Works Department. The first is request to appropriate $1.468356, so $1.4 million of Class C reserves toward 2 capital projects, 8th North, 8th West, and 1000 West, 100 West. And then secondly, to appropriate $236,191 from a UDOT reimbursement we received. I believe that was on the 7th North project that will be used toward other capital projects in our Public Works Department.
Does anybody have any further questions about that? This is a public hearing. If there's any members of the public who wish to speak to this, please come to the microphone and state your name. Seeing no one, I'll close the public hearing and bring it back to the council for action.
I'll move passage of Resolution 2207.
I'll second the motion.
It's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Resolution carries. Our second public hearing this evening is some code amendments. I will turn the time over to Mike Desmoni.
Okay, let's see. First one we have is ordinance 22-4. This is a public hearing tonight. I can just go through it real briefly. We workshopped this 2 weeks ago. We're going to talk about short-term rentals. And what short-term rental is, it's a transient rental accommodation, typically rented for less than 30 days. So it's different than a long-term rental, which is obviously longer than 30 days. Generally located within a single-family residential dwelling, but not always. That's the typical place where you see them. It's a commercial activity. It's not a residential occupancy per se, it's more commercial, and we regulate it differently than we do long-term residential occupancy. So why we're here tonight is we don't have any regulations or rules or standards for short-term rentals or vacation rentals. So technically they're not allowed anywhere in the city other than in the commercial zones. So they're not a specific use in either of the use tables and the residential or commercial use tables. They're treated as accommodations. So they're treated as a transient type of use, similar to like a hotel, motel. They're not a residential occupancy. We define occupancy in these 3 manners. Either you own a unit, you live there, you're there as a lease, under a lease, or you're there as a guest of that person either owns it or leases the property. They're not a bed and breakfast, so we have a definition of bed and breakfast, which is owner-occupied single-family dwelling, and then they rent nights or rent rooms overnight, and that usually provide like a breakfast type of deal. But these are not considered a bed and breakfast the way it's defined.
That's owner-occupied.
Yeah, for a bed and breakfast. This is the current zoning map. This shows you where they're permitted and not permitted. So everything that's in yellow, basically all the residential areas is where they're prohibited. These red areas in this pinkish, purplish area are where they are permitted. And again, we treat them as an accommodation or a hotel type of motel type of use. So there are some positive aspects of a short-term rental. You know, they generate income for property owners. They allow people to make use of a large home. Sometimes they're less expensive to travel than a traditional hotel. different experiences for travelers, they provide overflow lodging. And one thing that we've talked about, it's an incentive to keep your property nice, especially if you've got it listed on one of the platforms, because people look at your property based on reviews. So if you get good reviews, they'll generally want to stay there again, and more people want to go there. If it's a crappy review, they probably won't want to go there. So there's an incentive to keep your property nice. The negatives, it can lead to changes in the character of a neighborhood. If you look at other communities, say it's a Moab or a St. George, where they have a huge impact of these, or Park City, it has changed the character of a neighborhood. It's led to issues about availability and affordability of housing, and that's really what we're concerned about in this case. We also have an issue with occupancy. We don't allow for a standard dwelling unit to over-occupy. Why would we allow for a short-term rental to over-occupy? And then there's questions about whether or not they pay their fair share of lodging taxes. So we had a proposal. I'll just jump to the Planning Commission recommendation of what's in front of you. And what they concluded was there's not a huge demand for these in the city, so they recommended to you that you allow them in all zones, other than the industrial, commercial services, or the airport zone. And we provided some operation standards, and they generally agreed with those. When these got forwarded to you, require a business license, similar as we do a landlord license or an ADU or home occupation. The occupancy in residential zones, we proposed no more than 3 or no more than a family. And then occupancy in the commercial zones were no more than 2 per bedroom plus 2 additional. Designate a local contact as part of your licensing. Go to the next slide here. What they recommended for occupancy was 2 occupants per bedroom plus 2 additional occupants per unit. So that's across the city, so not zone specific. They were okay with the parking standards, which are basically 2 off-street parking stalls per unit, 1 off-street parking stall per 2 bedrooms in the commercial zone. And let's see. So the issues that we've talked about in the past, neighborhood impacts, the real beneficiary of your short-term rental is the owner at the expense of the neighborhood. I think people may disagree with that. You may hear some testimony about that. Potential negative impacts to housing availability and affordability. We have concerns about nuisances, transiency, occupancy, parking, noise, garbage, and then the character of Logan. We're not a tourist destination, so it's a little different than, say, a Park City or Moab. And then we have a concern about landlords using this system to circumvent student occupancy or student housing. And there may be a way to get at that, but that's really one of the concerns that we have. So be happy to answer your questions.
Do you all have any questions?
And what would be some of our options to try and limit that last concern that you have?
Well, here's some spitball ideas. One way to do it, you can get at, I guess, in terms of becoming a student rental or de facto student rental, is require owner occupancy in single-family zones. So you have to live there in order to rent it out as a transient type of occupancy. I looked at some other jurisdictions. Hurricane, not Hurricane, they put a limit on the number of licenses that any individual or any corporation or any partnership can own in their city. So basically you can own 1, whether you're an individual or a corporation. So that doesn't become an investment type of thing. It becomes you owning your own property.
You're going to go buy 5 properties just to do this.
Yeah.
So.
They also, in Hurricane, they also limit where you can put a short-term rental relative to any other short-term rental. So you've got to be at least 300 feet away from another one. So really, for us, that amounts to 1 per block. So you can have 1 per block base.
And it's first come, first served, basically.
Yeah, and they also limit it to 3 per 1,000 of population. So if their population is 20,000, that means they can have 60 in the city, and that's first come, first served. So once those 60 are filled up, you create a waiting list. Once 1 rolls off, the first one in line can come up and take their spot. So there's an incentive for you to keep your property up, keep your licensing current, follow all the standards. The other thing we've talked about internally in staff is that there might be a way to require a owner of a short-term rental to list all their occupants under a rental contract. So if I rent it to Jeannie or family, list who's going to be there, all 4 or 5 occupants, and then have a clause that would say you cannot rent to that same group or same individual for X amount of days in X amount of period of time. So I couldn't rent it to you for more than 45 days in a calendar year. Something like that. And I don't know if that's legal or not. That's something we need to vet through through our legal people, but put a limitation on how often I can rent to the same people.
And how would you anticipate enforcing that?
Well, if we require you to maintain your list of contacts or your list of people that you rent to, then you would be able to show us that. But again, it's on your honor to tell us that you're doing that. So that's a challenge for us to enforce it. So those are some ideas we have today. I don't know if they're viable or not, but.
Does that help you, Mark?
Yeah. There's been discussion at the legislature this session about this very topic and how it impacts, actual housing, rather than short-term rentals, just real housing, which is the shortage. So it looks like with the few days left in the legislature, there probably will not be any action this session, but they've sort of said, we're going to look at it during the interim and probably come up with some state guidelines. So again, we may be preempted, next year if they do choose to do something. But again, we're trying to get a little bit ahead of the issue, and we can adjust if we need to meet state code if they do implement something.
Can you put those options back up, Mike?
I think if there's an issue about housing availability and affordability, if you limit the total number you can have in a city, residential zones, whether it's population-based or it's distance-based or geographically based, that might help get it, whether or not you're going to create a demand for these, a huge demand. That's one way of doing it.
Well, I would think if you had a limited number, you would also be able to better understand whether the potential abuse is happening, because the number would be more limited.
Yeah, and what we've done is looked at like some of the platforms. The state law said we can't use a platform as a basis for enforcement. So I can't go on VRBO or Airbnb and say, oh, there's 12 of them, I'm going to go after them. But just looking to see what the numbers are on VRBO today, there was, I think, 15 or 16 on Airbnb. There was in Logan proper, almost 50 on that platform. But I think when the Planning Commission reviewed this, what they felt like was, there doesn't seem like a big demand for these. Doesn't seem like there's a lot of problems. We act on enforcement, on a complaint basis. So we deal with a couple a year. And there's always the ability to change the rules once you implement and see that there are problems. So.
Anybody else have any questions?
So what's our current city code for not enforcing someone running a business without a business license? So say I open a hair salon and I don't have a business license. If we're requiring a business license, what would that, I'm assuming those same regulations would apply to this, and I'll just admit I don't know what those are. So
Well, you'd be required to get a business license, so if we found out about it, we would obviously be required to do that. We want to make sure that where you're operating is consistent with the zoning. So you're in a commercial zone, or if you're in your house, you can do it as a home occupation. And we look at the scale of that, are you getting 2 clients a week, or are you getting 400 a week? So there's different parameters for that and different licensing options. But basically, when we do a business license, we want to make sure it's safe, not only for you, but for your clientele, and that whatever you're doing in there is going to meet the building code, fire code, and then licensing is a way to just track your business and make sure you're paying your taxes.
but if you're caught not operating a business without a license, what's the penalty?
We can fine you. We can also fine civilly, or
we can go through the administrative enforcement process and impose fines that way, and then we can also do a Class B, prosecute under a Class B misdemeanor.
And we can close your business down.
Yeah.
So.
And those, since this would be business license, those same penalties would apply to this. So if someone was running a VRBO without a business license.
That's correct.
Okay.
I'd be cautious on this. I mean, the biggest problems we've had regarding neighborhoods are the rentals, especially absentee landlords. And if something hurts our neighborhoods, degrades our neighborhood, I've had calls or letters from a number of people that we ought to be really careful of that. For example, we can game the system. I talked to Mike earlier. 4 people can go in, put it under A's name, a month later, put it under B's name, you know, they can game the system so that 4 people could literally rent it for the year. Thus, it becomes a boarding house. So in our thinking legally and with our discussions here, I think we need to be careful that we don't exacerbate the problems in our neighborhoods already. I had actually dinner with somebody who is quite a traveler, and we talked about this a little bit. And he said, you know, when you get into a place where Airbnb or what is it? VRBO, it turns a residence building into an economic unit. So that instead of a building being 300, 400, 500,000, all of a sudden it becomes $1 million, which prices a normal purchaser out of that neighborhood. And I don't know about you, but I'd rather have neighborhoods where people are interacting with each other in their home and they share things and they support each other rather than totally. And I know, you know, you gave some good suggestions on this. I think we just need to keep that in mind, that if we turn neighborhoods into economic things so that investors come in and we're no longer having residences. I'm concerned with enforcement. I think we already have problems with enforcement, but this would be something that's on top of that. I'd also suggest that we get input from neighborhood councils, especially Adams, Hillcrest, Woodruff, well, all the neighborhoods, well, at least those that have potentials. So that's comments that I have, at least at this time.
Anyone else?
Just to confirm or clarify, your recommendation from the community development is not to open it to, not to apply this citywide, but the planning commission is recommending that we do.
That's correct. Yeah, we originally recommended that in the, you allow them in the non-single family zones, allow them in the higher intensity zones, the multifamily zones, and commercial zones. That's our original recommendation. But they considered it in a different light. They felt that there wasn't a huge issue or impact with the existing ones that are out there, because we know they're out there.
Yeah.
They just felt like, well, that proves that it's not a problem, so why overregulate?
From the ones that currently exist or that are listed in those platforms, are they concentrated in a specific area?
No, actually, they're spread out throughout the city. That was interesting. They're all over the place.
I don't know, I'd have to agree with the planning commission. It seems more appropriate to open it to the whole city, but then limit it some of the ways that you've discussed with, you know, only offering so many licenses, but then it gives us the opportunity to enforce it, which is kind of the whole purpose of implementing this in the first place, isn't it?
Yep.
Okay.
I love staying in VRBOs.
Just not in my neighborhood.
Not in your neighborhood, yeah, I won't stay in your neighborhood, Tom. So I think, you know, as I've looked at it, I'm kind of struggling with, the purpose of them is often like 2 families travel together and they stay. So if you have occupancy limit of no more than 3 unrelated people, that's going to prohibit how somebody who's marketing a VRBO can actually use it. And I don't want to.
But we can't limit families.
But 2 families would be in violation of the 3 unrelated people.
Well,
right?
but
one
they're
family
housing
would
a
not.
bedroom.
Pardon? Yeah, but so I think that they should be allowed throughout the city, but I have a concern, as you stated too, Mike, that how do we make sure that it's not used as a circumvention over our occupancy standards in neighborhoods that have struggled with that. That's what I'm anxious to hear what our community thinks in our public hearing, and I would be interested in debating that with all of us afterward too.
Okay.
I should say
All right.
discussing.
It could be a debate.
It could be a debate.
This is a public hearing. Those of you who wish to speak to this issue, please come to the microphone, state your name, make sure you have signed in, and take less than 3 minutes, please.
Need a time.
Sure.
Not even a stick this time, huh? I'm Keegan Garrity. I'm in the Woodruff neighborhood. I already talked to Mark a little bit about this, but I'm in favor of, if we're going to allow these in low-density areas, neighborhoods, to make them owner-occupied for some of the same reasons Tom mentioned about not making it an investment area. I think that defeats the purpose of zoning if every house on your neighborhood or several houses just become rental places. You know, we have zones for a reason. I do think that the council should consider why we would allow short-term rentals citywide, but not ADUs citywide. That seems like an inconsistent decision. So maybe that's an appropriate time to revisit that. But I do think in an owner-occupied home, this could be a way for people who maybe affording a home is a little bit of a stretch. Maybe as they start out small, they can rent part of their rooms, and then as they grow their family, they can dissolve that rental area. So I do think that there is an appropriate place for that, but I know during the ADU discussion, a lot of that discussion centered around those rentals and the issues that come with parking, and particularly someone who's not necessarily invested in the community, someone that might be owning a home or a property out of state and then using it as a business, and I think that does defeat the purpose. So that's what I would advocate and recommend. So thanks.
Dr. Gail Yost. I'm very concerned about the very issues that Tom mentioned. We have an old neighborhood. We have a lot of rentals already that can interfere with sometimes getting to know our neighbors and having a more cohesive neighborhood. I'm concerned especially about the fact that it has owner-occupied, but that's a good thing. But still, some owners may come up with ideas about they own it, they should be able to do what they want with their own home. And I think it's important for the neighborhoods to have a chance to discuss this as each neighborhood, especially since I'm on the Wilson Neighborhood Council Steering Committee, and we meet tomorrow. I would like to bring this to them without a decision having already been made. So I'm going to ask you to please postpone this until the neighborhood councils can discuss this and see how we feel about it in our Wilson neighborhood. Thank you.
Hi, I've never been to one of these, so I'm a little nervous. I wrote everything down. My name's Kirsty Hatton. I've been a resident of Logan for almost 11 years now. I know some people have a lot of concerns about the short-term rental, like housing prices going up and stuff. I believe that allowing all residents or more residents would give first-time home buyers a better opportunity in a market that's already really scary for people to buy their first home. The average household income is about $66,000, and the average house price right now is $420,000. That makes it really difficult for first-time home buyers, and many young families are still renting because they can't afford to pay a mortgage. Having an option for first-time home buyers to sublet, and I like the owner occupancy idea and limit. That's a great idea. And this can give homeowners the opportunity to stay at home with their kids so they don't have to work to help to pay for their mortgage. That's why I'm here. Both me and my husband work, and if we were able to Airbnb our basement, I would feel a lot more comfortable staying home with my kids. We could get a little bit of income to help pay for our mortgage, and I know so many families that would like that opportunity. Of course, like you said, we need to have some limits, so not everyone on the street is Airbnb and it turns into like a investment thing and makes things more expensive. I think you guys came, or I don't know if there was, we came up with some boundaries where homes could Airbnb and VRBO, and I believe, do you have that map? Can you go to that map? And I think, if I remember right, a lot of those areas that are up on the bench in the more established homes, a lot of those people don't need help with their mortgage, or like they've been there for years and years and years. So I'm just wondering, why was that area picked for?
Well, this, excuse me, if I can respond, if that's okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, this map is our existing, or official zoning map, and all this shows you is that when you look at the map, the red area, the purple area, the pinkish area are areas where you currently can have an Airbnb. The area in yellow, light yellow on this side of town, you cannot have an Airbnb. So this is the current zoning.
Okay.
So we haven't decided or made a distinction between up on Hillcrest whether they can or can't, or on the west side whether they can or
Okay,
can't.
I thought I heard that, but maybe I heard wrong. Yep, that's what I have. Do you guys have questions? I've done a lot of research on Airbnbs. Most people are like small families. Logan doesn't bring like party people. It's like, I'm coming to visit my student for a few days. I'm coming to watch their games, or I'm coming to the bicycle marathon. It's not like, yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Am I able to leave, or is that not kosher? I was going to go be with my son.
Okay, great job as
Thank
a
you.
first timer.
Everybody just walks out after they say their stuff. It's all good.
My name is Fred Rigby. I live at 1682 East 1500 North. First of all, I applaud you for bringing this to the table, because I think in the past, while this short-term rental has been in the same bucket as bed and breakfast. But I personally prefer you to keep the Airbnbs out of the residential neighborhoods. We've had a personal experience with Airbnb. It went up just last year. There was several undesirable consequences of that. We had RVs parked on the lawn, on the street, big dogs running the neighborhood, loud noises during the night. And my son lived right next door to one as well, and there was a big draw for university games come in, and they would party all weekend long, and they would hardly ever go to bed, and it's noisy. And then the second thing that I want to bring up is the fact that I'm concerned about the enforcement. Personally, the enforcement, I know you can't say to an Airbnb by going on the website and find that out. But the way I understand it, you have to call a cell phone number and report the person, report this as an Airbnb, suspected Airbnb. They have to actually physically go there, knock on the door, and somebody's got to answer and says, and answer affirmatively, are you here for less than 30 days? If they are, then they can go ahead and fines could be issued. But my experience has been, we call the cell phone number, we text the cell phone number, no answer, not at all. That's the same with on this situation with the Airbnb next to us, and my son's next to him. We never could get a hold of any enforcement agency whatsoever, so enforcement was non-existent at that point. I personally think you should wait to make a decision on this until we get neighborhood councils involved. We just happened to hear about this on the radio yesterday. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here tonight. But my neighborhood council hasn't notified anybody in our neighborhood about this happening, and I think that they would want to have the opportunity to do that. So I propose that we not make a decision tonight, but get the neighborhood councils involved, get their input as well. Thank you.
And I'm not sure what cell number you're calling, but if there's a noise complaint, if somebody's parked on a lawn, if there's dogs at large, just call the police right then.
Well, we were told, we dealt through your office, just call this enforcement person. This is the cell phone number that they gave us.
Well, again, if it's something immediate right then, a noise complaint, please call the police. Yeah, you're welcome to, I mean, if there's,
Well,
there's a charge for disorderly house, if there's loud
My
parties and
my son
noise.
did call the police, and they says that's the enforcement officer problem to take care of.
Yeah, if it was passed on to us, we would enforce on it.
Well, I wasn't the one, I mean, he was, well, that's what he told to me, and they've got many, many stories about Airbnbs. Thank goodness why the house sold next to him, and it's no longer an Airbnb. And the house that in our neighborhood was turned into an Airbnb. They've got a long-term rental for another few months, and then who knows what'll happen after that. So we want to get this settled before that happens, so. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rigby.
How's it going? My name's Ted Mahan. I live just behind the university, and I'm pro Airbnb. I'll say that when my wife and kids travel, we love staying in Airbnbs when we go places, mostly because it gets us out of those hotel zones and puts us into kind of the heart of the community, gives us a good introduction of where we are, and we always talk about, you know, is this a place that we could see ourselves retiring one day? We went to Seattle a couple months ago, went over to Olympic National Park there, stayed in Port Angeles, stayed in a tiny Airbnb that was tucked back in a neighborhood, felt like part of the community, you know, went for a jog that evening, and it really just changed my perspective of what that community meant. And I think Logan has a lot to offer outside of that red zone and that pink zone right there. And I think putting people in those areas encourages people that are coming to visit their kids to get out and potentially think of retiring here, buying some, you know, nice property to actually live in and become part of the community. In addition to that, I've read some impact reports that are posted on the Airbnb website that talk about spending habits of consumers that stay in hotels versus Airbnbs. And on average, someone stays about 60% longer when they stay in an Airbnb and spend about twice as much, which I thought was a valuable piece of information. And then 72% of their spending takes place outside of hotel zones, which I think creates a huge impact on the economy and provides a lot of revenue for struggling businesses, new businesses, businesses that are scattered throughout the community that really develop the community itself. So that's kind of my perspective. I do think the permits is a good way to do it. That way we limit the amount and the density, maybe even a certain amount of permits per neighborhood, or that limit of what, 3 per 3,000 or something like that. But either way, I'm pro that, and also I'm kind of anti owner occupied, just because I know a lot of people that travel on weekends. It's my son there. A lot of people that travel on weekends like to rent out their house when they're gone for the weekend. They're still there during the week. They're still part of the community. They're still helping make their neighborhoods a, you know, better place. But it kind of helps them subsidize the cost of, you know, growing more expensive mortgages. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Good points.
Maybe it's the first time.
Hey, we like it.
Yeah.
My name
You'll
is
come
Gary
back
Hoffman.
again.
I'll try to keep this short and sweet. I do think we should have Airbnbs. People
Please
should
tell
have
us
the
your name
opportunity.
first.
You did, Gary Hoffman.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
It's okay. For me, it's basically economics. We're not Jackson. We're not Park City. If there gets to be too many Airbnbs, it'll saturate the market and people won't be able to make money off of them. And then some of the problems, there's a lot of what ifs. What if there's loud parties where this happens? Where I live, my neighbors, they love to throw loud parties. They go right till 10 o'clock. And then it shuts down. I don't necessarily like it. I don't like the type of music they play, but you know what? That's what it is. And so I see a lot of, well, what if this happens? What if this happens? But what are the chances of that happening? Like, we aren't Jackson Hole. We don't get a bunch of world travelers here. But yeah, we do have the Aggie games. Go Aggies.
But really, we think about it logically, it most likely isn't going to be an issue going forward. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Connor Simmons. I apologize, I've got a list, so bear with me. So first, I do want to say that the arguments I've heard are very solid, but I want to stick with the fact that we aren't a destination location. I do have a personal story on that. Across the state of Utah, along with many partners, so it's not a sole entity, but we have about 40 Airbnbs, ranging from Kanab, St. George to Logan. With that said, I was here for 6 years, had to go to Salt Lake, got to come back about a year ago. And we did buy 3 in Logan city limits within a few months. And we immediately recognized that we could not sustain that growth. So we have completely shifted our business strategy to Ogden and back to Salt Lake. So the 3 that we have, they're good. Our numbers are not anywhere near what they are in Salt Lake or even Ogden. So from an economic standpoint, I truly don't think there's a concern that there's going to be crazy growth here. Investors aren't going to care to come in here and swoop up multiple properties. I truly think it'll stay within the locals, right? Locals renting out basements. I will add, let me get back to my notes. Room rentals are pretty rare, especially in Logan. It's going to be a lot more people looking for their own dwelling, their own unit. They want a kitchen, and that brings in families, traveling friends. We travel with our friends a lot. We'll get an Airbnb because we can stay in a room and they can stay in a room, so it makes it more cost effective for us. Average stay is 60% longer. So they are different than hotels because people are coming, the stays we have here in Logan are usually between, we do get overnights, no doubt, but usually 1 to 3 weeks. We've even done grad students that couldn't find a place, so they come and stay for a semester. Guests are short-lived, so if you have a bad neighbor that's a long-term neighbor, they're going to be a bad neighbor for a long time. If you get a bad guest, they're going to be short-lived. And there are great ways for Airbnb for us as hosts to remove them. With that being said, we are aiming for 5 stars. So our objective is to keep our guests happy, our neighbors happy, so that they don't. We have had neighbors that bother guests, but we want to keep everybody happy because we're going for a good experience for everybody. Let's see. One thing I do want to discuss, we've invested, again, amongst my partnerships, over $1 million into the about 40 homes that we've renovated. I say that because we are coming into these older neighborhoods and able to come in and re-landscape a home, bring a home up to code, and really beautify a neighborhood. That is especially prevalent in Salt Lake, but not so much here. And cut me off if I need to stop.
Well, you're pretty close. You said it's 3 minutes, but.
Shoot, let's see. I think I've hit just about everything that's really important. I am also a big fan of potentially allowing ADUs for something like this. And actually for the housing crisis that we're in, to throw in a little nugget there. Owner occupied especially, just because that does allow for us to ease that burden on the housing crisis. So that's all. Thanks.
Thank you very much.
If you can stick around later, Connor, I'd like to ask a couple questions. So if it doesn't go too long, So.
Is there anyone else who wishes to speak to this?
Hi, we're first timers too. I just need some notes. So, did you guys know that Airbnb put in a policy for, Diane Roundy, and I did sign the book. Airbnb put in a policy for New Year's Eve parties. They had so many problems with the one-nighters just blowing the place up, but they actually put a minimum stay of 2 nights on. So it was a significant investment for people to come stay 2 nights. And it seemed to cut down the partying on New Year's Eve. Airbnb has many rules like that. It is highly regulated. There are certain criteria you have to meet. You rate your guests, they rate the host, and that is what you live off, is your 5 stars, just like he mentioned. 62% of the visits in our area come from less than 300 miles away. That's pretty local to me. 300 miles is easy. The upkeep on an Airbnb, those yards, those homes have to be immaculate. Everything has to be in working order. It has to be decorated, it has to be accessible, and it has to be a place where families can get together, cook a meal, sit and visit, order pizza, whatever they want, sit on the patio, whatever. In your commercial zones, you don't have great parking. You're trying to put parking enforcement on, but there's not great parking with the Airbnbs that are operating in downtown Logan. We are for close contact. You mentioned something about the owner or the manager being within an hour of the property. We are for that, but we are not for owner occupied. People I've talked to who have come to the area and stayed, 2 have come for funerals. 2 families have come for funerals. Texas, North Carolina have met in Logan to bury their dad in our Logan cemetery to bring him home. One guest that was here on one wanted a family Christmas with their whole family where they could stay in one place. One trip was a first ski trip to Beaver Mountain for a Texas niece that had never been skiing before, and he wanted to bring her to Beaver Mountain. The local area has so many things, especially during the summer, that people want housing for and they want to stay together. Yards have to be upkept. There is usually a list of rules in the home. Here's your list of rules. Here's your emergency contacts. Here's your towing. Here's your hospital. Here's a list of local restaurants that you can visit in our community.
10 seconds.
Please keep track of, here's the things to keep our home in order. And that's how it operates. So thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak to this issue? Going once? Going twice? Public hearing is now closed. Bring it back to the council.
So can I ask a clarifying question? When we say owner occupied, that doesn't mean the owner has to be in the home during the rental. It just means they own the home. So if somebody goes away for the weekend, they could have people come and stay in the house.
They'd be considered their primary residence.
Primary residence. So yeah, it doesn't mean the owner has to be in the house while they're doing the rental.
Correct.
Okay, just wanted to clarify that because I think somebody brought that up. And I also just want to clarify, for short-term rental, we're not saying you have to use a Airbnb or VRBO, so.
Yeah, we're not saying if you use a platform.
Yeah, so.
What we're saying in your licensing, you've got to designate a local point of contact, so if we get complaints, you can call.
Thanks.
Anybody else?
So I do appreciate the sentiment of wanting to perhaps get more input from the neighborhood councils. I know Hillcrest is having their meeting in the 14th. I know Wilson's having theirs. I don't know if
Tomorrow, Gail said
Woodruff
tomorrow.
has one scheduled. Obviously I don't think neighborhood councils come to a consensus, right? There's going to be lots of different voices at those too, but I would be particularly interested in hearing of those neighborhoods that we took into consideration when we did do the ADU as to how their perception of this would be. But I still think we need to allow them. I just want to make sure that it's enforced and done correctly. It seems a lot of people like that idea of having limited number of licenses. I don't know what that number is for us. And I don't know that, I guess what I'm saying is, I'm not sure I'm ready to vote on this tonight, because I have a lot of unanswered questions, like, if we do put a cap, what would that cap be? And I don't feel prepared to
So you're
decide
open,
that
you're open
tonight.
for continuance tonight.
I'm up for continuance, but I would think we should talk about what our questions and our concerns are.
Mike, you said there were 50 that you found on Airbnb. So
Today, correct.
Today. Were they duplicated on VRBO, or were they different? So there were, so you said 17 on the other site? You don't know?
I don't know. There was,
Okay.
I think there was some carryover, but.
So say if there's 50 today, what density is that based on the population?
1 per 1,000.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've got, I mean, really, we've got 51,000 people, give or take, so that's.
Is that with or without students?
That's just the number we get from the census, so how to really calculate that, that's what we use. So yeah, it's about 1 per 1,000.
Okay.
Well, I agree with Amy and with a number of these people. It's only fair. We're trying to strengthen our neighborhoods. They ought to weigh in on it. So I would, if Amy made a motion, I would second it. Or should I make the motion to continue it to the
Well,
14th?
okay, before we do any of that, let's clarify. Do we want to have, we need to have some clarification in order to,
Like, what are we
bump
postponing it for?
Yeah, what are we
Waiting for.
postponing it for? And if we're going to talk to the neighborhoods, we need to talk to every neighborhood, not just a few.
Right.
And what time period are you talking about for that? Are we gonna try and have meetings in the next 2 weeks? Do you want to do it in a month? I'm just throwing all this out there.
It's a good,
I think that we need to, I know that I have questions about enforcement, and we need to figure out the whole number of people thing. That is a little bit difficult for me, because I know that we have a tremendous problem with over-occupancy in our long-term rentals. And I'm really not happy allowing a short-term rental that could become a long-term rental, like for a semester.
what if we did this? I'm just going to throw this out. There's a lot of variables. Mike, I appreciate what you've done. This is good. But what if we refined it to get something that's more defined for the neighborhoods and let them chew on that rather than what is somewhat nebulous right now?
How are we going to do that now in this meeting?
No.
How are we going to do that?
Well, Mike's heard a lot of it. Let him kind of refine it.
Yeah, we'll just throw it back to you, Mike.
Sure, why not?
Or I could send, we could take the presentation that comes from, it mentions what planning commission recommends, what staff recommends. I could send that PowerPoint out to all the neighborhood council chairs for them to share with the neighborhood council members.
Yeah, we could, why don't we schedule a meeting
ask for
with the
input
groups,
back.
if they want us to show up and, do a dog and pony we can, if they want to just chew on it, maybe they could provide some feedback based on their neighborhood specific.
But we'll need to have a time specific for them to have done that.
Or if they don't want to hold a meeting, they could have people email and contact us in that way too. I know that not all of the neighborhood councils have regularly scheduled meetings or have leadership. So I think, to your point, it can't just be a few. It needs to be a mechanism of notification and opportunity for people to weigh in on their
Do you have
thoughts.
a chair for every neighborhood?
Yes, I do.
I think it would be a good idea to send the presentation out to them
I can do that.
and give them the option of holding a meeting in the next 2-3 weeks.
I think if we come back in a month, because Amy and I will both be gone for the next meeting.
Well, I'll be virtual.
Well, you're always virtual.
You're always here. Always
But if we did it in,
Well, no, but I'm trying to give some framework to getting neighborhood council input.
I think they could also do it by email if they chose. I know one neighborhood that has said, we want to wait till we're a little further through COVID. I mean, maybe we're to the point we're okay, but.
Well, we could always
to have
I mean, we're good at virtual meetings anymore, so if they chose to hold a virtual meeting for their neighborhood, one of us could be a part of that and, you know, have a presentation if that's what, or they could just take the
Yeah, they can get
presentation
email,
itself and
yeah.
send it out.
Right, exactly, and
ask
get
for
email
feedback.
comments. I think that's, we'll let them do
But I
it
would
as
like
they choose.
them to have those comments back to us at least a week before we are meeting.
Sorry, next, so April 5th.
First meeting in April.
Soonest.
Yeah,
Right,
can I weigh in
do
on that? Why
something.
don't we give them a month? So just out of respect of the groups, to get according to a lot of people, give them the month of March to get themselves organized, have their meetings, talk about it, and then come back to us.
April 5th?
Well, and then if you want to have it, I mean, I'm super important, I know that, but I'm going to be gone April 5th, so.
Let's do it the second meeting in April.
April 19th?
So are you saying second?
Second meeting of April?
So when we're saying the presentation, are we talking about this presentation? Because
Yes.
I think, Mike, that last slide with some of those options, that wasn't discussed at Planning Commission, that last slide
No, it
after your
wasn't.
questions. So I think those are important for the neighborhoods to look at, because I think, you know, some of those restrictions weren't in there. For example, the multiple rental contract idea, the contract for all occupants, the limits by square footage,
Yeah, that last
I was-
slide was not in front of the planning commission.
There was some discussion at Planning Commission regarding RVs. Where did that fall out in their recommendation?
In terms of RV
Where they
parking?
could park?
The recommendation is off-street,
Okay.
yeah. Boats,
I'm not
trailers.
very fond of on-street RV parking, personally.
so you're saying, like, so if someone has an
RV.
Airbnb and they bring their RV, they have to park it in the driveway, not on the street.
There has to be availability for them to park it on site.
Well, don't we say that there has to be?
That's the recommendation, the recommendation.
That was the recommendation, was that it has to be on off-street parking for these. So,
Parking, and then, sorry.
They bring an RV, wouldn't they stay in the RV?
well, they could stay in the RV, but it can't stay
Oh,
parked
yeah.
on the street.
Yeah.
That's I think what Jeannie's saying.
Right.
Okay.
So we can send them the proposed code changes, the language, so they can see what's actually being proposed to you.
Okay.
And we can give them a copy of this, with the caveat that last sheet didn't go to PC, it's just testimony
Is
thinking out loud.
it possible for us to send them your proposed language and the way the language would read as the Planning Commission determined?
Yeah, we can give them the whole packet, basically what we sent you, we can give them to them.
So that they have an idea of where your thinking was, where Planning Commission's thinking was, and then they can sort of weigh between those two.
May I also suggest that we include the minutes for our meeting with that as well, so that the public comment that was given here in our discussion also is included.
That's a great
That
idea.
To the neighborhood councils.
Okay. Is there anything else you want to spend time on in the next month that we need to?
So those minutes
enough
won't be,
time?
those minutes won't be approved though until March 15th. For tonight's minutes won't be approved until March 15th.
We could just send the draft of this
Yes.
portion of the meeting, I would think, just if it's clearly marked as a draft. But
So if we're finished, does anyone have a motion?
So Jeannie, just to clarify, so this will be continued to the April 19th?
Just wait.
Okay.
Somebody has to make a motion for that
I'll
to
move
happen.
that we continue this until the second council meeting in April, where we will have some revised language from Mike, and there will
We'll
be...
have feedback from the
And
neighbors.
that's what I was going to say. And we would have some feedback from the neighborhood councils, and that it would be a public comment, meaning a public hearing,
Another one?
so that the neighborhood council can say things.
Is there a second?
I'm not sure about
The public,
additional public hearing.
I would second also without the public hearing, so. Everybody's gonna have plenty of opportunity to speak again,
Are you
yeah.
willing to amend your motion?
Well, I'll try to persuade first. I think the people came here in good faith. I think there's going to be some other people that have been motivated. And I guess, I'm quoting you, but more input is better. I'd rather not shortchange the public on this. So did I persuade anybody? It's going to cost you another half an hour.
Not at all.
No, no, and I certainly would never not want to have public comment. I guess I think like the fact that we're extending this to have the neighborhood councils weigh in.
That's more avenue
That's
for
more
public comment, yeah. And like we've always said, it's like you can call us, email us. I mean, there's plenty of opportunities for more public comment, but in this situation where we're getting feedback
So
from the
there's no
neighborhood
support
committee.
for another public.
So are you willing to amend your
Oh,
motion?
of course.
So
You've persuaded me.
would you restate it, please?
I move that we continue this until the second meeting of April, that we'll have some redrafted language from Mike, that there will be information given out to all the city neighborhood councils, and that will hopefully get meetings. Well, that doesn't have to be in the motion, so let it be written.
Is there a second?
So the motion is that we're postponing this till the second meeting in April?
Keep it short and sweet.
Okay, I will second that.
There we go.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion?
No.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you very much to who came, and we look forward to getting input. If you have anything else you'd like to say or have any more comments, please share them with us via email or through the neighborhood councils. We'll move now to our second code amendment discussion. Mike.
Okay.
Welcome back.
I'm glad to be here. Okay, this is ordinance 22-5, and this is a proposal to amend the land development code, and I'll just go through it real briefly. We talked about this last time. It's got two elements to it. One is you're creating some RV park standards. We don't have any standards right now for RV parks, so hopefully this will set us up. If somebody wants to do one, we know what they can do. And then the second one is just amend our use table in our commercial zones to take out a couple of uses. So I'm going to jump down to the RV park one first. This one's pretty straightforward. What we're suggesting is that when you want to do an RV park in Logan, you've got to have at least 3 acres. We're saying the maximum density is 20 RVs, or 20 RV stalls per acre. So basically it's 60 units to start, and then you go from there. You've got to improve it with hardened surfaces, minimum space dimensions, hookups, parking. Basically, you can't just pull it in on dirt, call it an RV park. You've got to improve it. Setbacks, a buffer area, perimeter open space of 25 feet, internal roadways that are paved, minimum widths, parking areas that are designated, minimum open space for overall site, 20%, require landscaping. This came up in a discussion over the last year and a half. We've dealt with other RV parks and rezones. Basically, management stall, designate 1 stall per 20 for management use and year-round occupancy. So that's if you've got somebody who works there, who maintains it, at least they've got 1 stall that's set aside for permanent year-round use. And then length of stay has been an issue. So what we came up with was a max stay is 30 days, but you can, as part of the review process, designate 20% of your total stalls for long-term occupancy or 180 days. So that would allow you to capture the snowbird or the sunbirds, for at least a percentage of them. You still have enough turnover. And then limits on where you can put accessory vehicles, boats, ATVs, parking, things like that.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
So the maximum stay of 30 days is in the park or in a spot?
That is in the spot. So if you get up and move, then that's going to be considered you've moved to a different spot. And 30 days is interesting because that came from FEMA, of all places. They have a 30-day stay for RV parks when you put one in a floodplain. So it's got to be that unit can't be there longer than 30 days. So that requires you to keep that thing mobile. And that's really the goal, is that's always able to move and not become a permanent fixture. So That's why I took 30 days.
So when you talked about maximum density was 20 stalls per acre, and then you had one management stall per 20 stalls.
Yes.
So that means you can't have more than 2 management stalls in an RV park, correct?
Yeah, you could have up to 3.
How, you can't, that'd be 63 stalls.
No, one of those 20. So you would have, so if your starting line is 3 acres and you get 20 units to the acre, that's 60 units, 60 trailers, then 3 of those 60 could be for management use, or so then really you're renting out 57 of them.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. Maybe I just made that backwards in my head.
That's a good question.
No, I made it backwards in my head.
Just as a clarification, we have a mobile home subdivision on the west side of town, which is each lot is one city, excuse me, each pad is one residential lot. And that's long-term, obviously. People have lived there for a long time. It's been managed well. Do we have provisions for that anymore? This is an RV park, which is different.
Well, we have a mobile home or a zoning, but we don't apply it very often. We have some of those parks that are mobile homes and that's it.
But we won't allow any additional
Right.
mobile homes.
So, and this is really for recreational vehicles. So we've
Right,
got,
I get that. It's proven to be a pretty affordable housing for people that need affordable housing right now.
yeah, yes and no. In some cases that can be, in a lot of cases they are predatory in that the person that owns the park leases you the space. They also will sell you the unit at an inflated interest rate. And so really you're paying twice to the same person for an old home or an old dilapidated mobile home.
Well, it's a market thing, you know.
Yeah, but you're preying on folks that really don't have a lot of cash or the ability to get a good line of credit to buy a home. So yeah, they definitely have a niche, but I think they're also in some respects a little predatory.
Okay, well, that's not what we're talking about. I just
So
was curious.
None of this applies to any existing RV park, is that correct?
That's correct. It's anything new that's coming through the door.
So the one by across from Zollinger's, it does not apply.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Okay, so let's jump back to the use element of this amendment. So in the use table, we obviously list a range of uses that will be permitted, conditionally permitted or not permitted within the commercial or industrial zones. And when this land development code was set up, we allowed RV parks and campgrounds to go in the commercial service and industrial zone because that's where a lot of the available land was. So what I'm suggesting is we pull that out of those zones and just say, if you want to put an RV park in, get it zoned rack, that's where it really should be. Go through the rezone process to do it. The other part of this is to eliminate commercial self-storage, mini storage units from CS and the IP zone because at this point in time, we need to think about the uses that are going in the industrial zone. Should be a little bit more tax incentive or tax intensive base and employment intensive base. So you compare a Gosner's or a Costco we just approved to a mini storage unit, and you look at they both take the same amount of land, but a Gosner's turns so much more over in terms of tax revenue and employment than it does a storage facility. So allow those further out in the airport zone or even out in the other communities that need them, but I'd say from a perspective of land use in the city of Logan, we should not allow those in the industrial zone anymore. So that is the gist of what we talked about last time.
Makes sense.
And happy to answer any questions.
Does anybody have any further questions before I open it to the public? This is a public hearing. Anyone who wishes to speak on this amendment, please step forward, state your name, and please take 3 minutes or less. Going once, going twice. Closing the public hearing and bring it back to the council for a discussion and a decision.
All our newcomers left.
We scared them all away.
I would move adoption of ordinance 22-05.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? We'll move now to our final public hearing of this evening, CDBG fiscal year 2022 annual action plan. Amanda, you've been waiting so patiently.
Okay, this presentation is to initiate the start of the annual action plan for CDBG program year 2022.
Ooh, that's colorful.
Right. The annual action plan defines funding allocations for 2022. CDBG funds based on priorities
Excuse me,
adopted.
could you speak up a little bit?
Sure, sorry. The CDBG funds based on priorities adopted in the 2019 to 2023 con plan. Some considerations to public infrastructure and facilities. What areas of the city should be emphasized? What types of projects would the city like to accomplish? For nonprofit service, are there specific services that are lacking that CDBG could help? Are there programs that need support? Or are there particular groups of people who are in need of service? And for planning, are there planning projects that should be given consideration? Priority number 1 is to contribute to infrastructure or facility improvements. The funding goal is 50% over 5 years, 40% to infrastructure and 10% to access and mobility. Projects include sidewalks, curb and gutter, park improvements, community gardening or gathering areas, improved lighting, traffic, calming measures, remediation of access and mobility barriers. Currently in year 3, funding is at 49% infrastructure and 11% to access and mobility. The priority number 2 is to support social services, nonprofit, or neighborhood initiatives that address community needs for low to moderate income residents. The funding goal is 30% over 5 years, 20% to facility and 10% to service. Some projects could be for domestic abuse programs, volunteerism programs, integration of the immigrant community, senior home care programs, job training incentives, transitional housing units, public transit services, affordable programming for kids, or basic financial management classes. Currently in year 3, funding is at 14% facility and 8% service. Priority number 3 is administration and planning. The funding goal is 20% over 5 years, 15% to admin and 5% to planning. The admin is for grant administration, 1 full-time employee, and then any planning projects. And currently in year 3, funding is at 17% admin and 0.7% planning. And then here's a timeline for the 2022 project year, starting with the public hearing today. Application period is March 2nd through April 1st. And then we'll schedule some steering committees on the off week of City Council. So the first one will be April 12th, and then possibly a second on the 26th, or we could even do it before City Council meeting. And then there's a public comment period that's May 7th through June 7th, and then it ends with the public hearing and the adoption of the annual action plan on June 7th. That's it.
Thank you. Welcome. There's no, we don't have to do anything today, right?
No, just any questions.
So are you
or public
anticipating, I will ask one question. You have stated what the percentages were for 2021. Are those the percentages you're anticipating it to repeat again? Or are the percentages that you showed the ones that you anticipate for this next year of funding?
The total, where they're at?
Well, no, the 10% and 7% and of each category.
That's what we funded
If you
so
go back
far
a
for the
couple of
last 3 years,
slides,
right?
yeah, like 15%, the funding goal is 15 to 5, and it's currently at 17.7. Is that where it is cumulatively through year 3?
Yes.
Okay.
Year three, a lot of it hasn't been spent yet, so that's kind of just going off of what was awarded.
Okay, so we have year 4 and 5 still in this plan, and we need to address the inconsistencies through funding, this probably in the next couple of years, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Is that intended to say 0.7%, or is it 7?
0.7.
Yep.
Because the other one is 5%.
Yeah.
So, and just for the public, there also is a community development block grant program for the county. This is the one that is for Logan City, so it's targeted at residents of Logan City, correct? So when nonprofits or organizations apply for funding, they need to bear in mind that their grant application needs to apply to the percentage of people that they serve that live in Logan City, because county funds are available that serve the county at large. Is that correct?
Correct.
And that has been an issue in the past. We've had applications where the majority of the clients of a particular nonprofit were not in Logan City, and that makes it much harder for us to give them funding. You're right. So, any other,
I was
sorry.
going to ask, how do people apply for the grant or for the program?
The application is up on the website. They could come to the reception desk and get one in person as well. Or email me and I can email one. Or call. There's a lot of information on the website.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Are you guys good with the April 12th meeting?
Do a public hearing.
For the steering committee meeting?
For the steering
That's what
committee.
it says.
April 12th works for me.
That's when we would review applications and make a recommendation.
Yeah.
That works for me as of today.
So this says it's a public hearing.
Today is.
Today is.
Yeah.
Okay.
So people can give input into those priorities that were just presented.
That's right.
So Amanda, will you send us all a calendar invitation for that April 12th date then, so we can?
Yes.
Yeah, I will.
So this is a public hearing. If there's any member of the public that wishes to speak about the priorities as listed or anything else having to do with CDBG, please come to the microphone.
Hi, I'm being vociferous today. Dr. Gail Yost, I wanted to know how you would prioritize city-backed projects versus nonprofit projects. Do the nonprofits get a higher rating because of their services, or is it all kind of equal between what the city may want to do versus what the nonprofits need?
I think we just try to stay within the funding goals. So the 30% of the total funds received towards nonprofits or service.
And these nonprofits, is there any room for any other kind of nonprofit other than what has been listed?
I would think so, yes. As
Okay.
long as they
I
can.
I was thinking of more services for homeless, if possible, those kinds of things. And we're seeing a lot of homeless that don't get a lot of services, and many of them are working families. They just are still homeless. So thank you for the answers.
Is there anyone else? I'll close the public hearing. And we'll move now to our workshop items. We have 3. First is a budget adjustment. Rich?
Several items to consider. All of these are grants or reimbursements. The first is a request to appropriate $11,610 for a library cleft grant for collection development. Next, a request to appropriate $10,609 for police overtime reimbursements. Next, a request to appropriate $5,363 for bulletproof vest grants. And lastly is a request to appropriate $14,667 for mental health. It was a grant that the fire department received for mental health purposes.
How much does a bulletproof vest cost?
Why do you think you need one?
No, I was just curious. How many can you buy with that much?
They're about $800 a piece.
Okay, I was thinking 500 to 1,000. So yeah.
Super comfortable to wear too.
All those angry planters that, are unhappy when their tree doesn't blossom in spring.
No.
You could walk around and try and hold it up because it weighs so much.
I was just curious how many you could buy with that much. So yeah, so 8 to 10. Okay.
Any other questions or comments?
Use it as a flotation device also.
Is that comment directed at
I don't think it's a flotation. I think it's the opposite of a flotation device.
I was just curious because we were going over that. I was like, how many can we buy with that much? So.
Okay, I'm going to turn the time over to Tanya for a rezone.
Hello, everyone. It's been a while.
Hi, Tanya.
Hi. Pull my presentation up. Alrighty. So this is West Point subdivision. It is part of the Royal Point subdivision, if any of you are familiar with that. But this is 1/6 of the West Point subdivision. It is located on the south side of 14th North between 2nd and 4th West. You can see the parcel is right across from Standard Plumbing, and you can see here the DI, Winco, and Sam's Club. So it's this general stretch right here. Alrighty. It is the proposals for a rezone and a subdivision of this entire parcel, which is 1.36 acres of developed land. Because this is a little different than normal for a rezone, I'm going to give you a little bit of history, and then we'll get back to the actual rezone. The parcel in the blue was developed in 1994 with 20 dwelling units, and these were housed within 5 buildings. So each of these buildings has 4 units. Part of the development was, let me get my map cursor here if you can see it. Boy, that's hard to see. Part of the development was common area, a private drive accessing the dwellings, and 10 two-car garages. So this is the original development. The property has changed. Oh, for starters, it was condominiumized instead of legally subdivided, and that's why we're here talking about this. They're 2 completely different things. The applicant's intent is to change the nature of the parcel from condominiums where the owners only own building, not the land, into a subdivision where the owners own the land underneath. So the underlying purpose of this is to make the properties easier to market and sell. And after 25 years of not meeting the requirements of a legal subdivision, the applicant is requesting the city to work with them on that legal subdivision now. But since 1994, the zoning in this Bridger neighborhood has changed twice, both being downzoned, which leaves this particular parcel legally existing but non-conforming, with more units than are currently permitted on this parcel. So in order for them to get the subdivision that they want, they have to come back and get a rezone, and they're asking to go from 12 units per acre to 20 units per acre. So this is really the crux of the discussion tonight. It's the first step of the proposal, and taking a look at the FLUP, you can see that it's a mix of multifamily and single family zoning districts with a little bit of commercial services to the north. But when you look at the actual current zoning, it's MR12 in this multifamily area with NR6 around in the area. Let's see. So looking at the zoning historically, let's look at what they could have done in 1994, what they did, and what they want to do. So in 1994, it was zoned R4. It allowed for 19 units to 32 units per acre. That was what was permitted. That would, in just calculating the 19.5, it would have been 26 units on their 1.3 acres would have been permitted at that time in 1994. They built 20 units. So to the left is the condominium plat that was recorded in 1994 showing the buildings, the garages, and the common area. And again, this is, the 5 buildings are 20 units. So currently, so it's been downzoned since 94, one other time other than the current, and we are now looking at MR12 is what it is currently zoned. That's 12 units per acre, and that would currently allow 16 units on this parcel. What they're asking for is a rezone to 20 units per acre because they have 20, which would though allow 27 units on the 1.36 acres. In your face, looks like.
If the buildings were all torn down, they could rebuild 27 units,
Correct.
basically.
Yeah.
Or they could add to it if it met MR20.
The setbacks and all of those
Right.
things.
Setbacks, open space, and all that. So ultimately, 27 would be allowed on this lot if it were to be rezoned. So staff has discussed neighborhood compatibility at length. And I thought I would share some of what we've discussed, and it is more incompatible than compatible as far as what we have come up with. So in looking at the rezone, it allows 27 per acre, what we just talked about. If it were to all burn down, they could do 27, or they could add to it, or they could build up, or whatever. There's no other MR20 in the surrounding area, which I'll show you in a moment what that looks like. Incompatible with, the MR20 is incompatible with the single-family zone to the south. The Bridger neighborhood already contains one of the highest percentages of multifamily, high-density multifamily in the area, which, can lead to a more transient lifestyle, which was brought up by the school district, and there have been negative impacts on Bridger Elementary due to the high transiency. And you guys, most importantly, listened to that and have had, authorized zoning actions accordingly, and have been downzoned to prevent the additional high density and the higher density projects.
What about the property just to the east? I mean, that looks so similar. It's like density-wise, is it like
To the
to the
east.
east?
All
You've
of
got
these?
all those. I mean, that looks like identical.
Okay, so a little bit of backstory, but long before my time, this piece right here, these 6 parcels were called Royal Subdivision. Royal Point Subdivision. So it was subdivided into 6 parcels. Many of these did the legal subdivision that was at
At
the
that
time,
time.
in 1994. This did not. This chose to condominiumize.
But these are all fourplexes, just like the.
Many of them are, yeah, yeah.
But there's the critical difference between subdividing and condominiumizing.
Yes, yeah.
So
I'm just looking at it going,
Yeah.
kind of looks like access to me, but.
I guess I don't understand the clear distinction between the subdivision
Well,
and the
I think
condominiumization.
before, when you, Tanya, finish up and then go through the reasons why they requested the subdivision, or the upzone. But finish what you're doing first.
Okay. Okay. So this is what it would look like should the rezone go through. We would have MR20 in and amongst MR12 and NR6. That's what that looks like. PC recommended denial of the rezone 7-0 to be forwarded to you. That's important. And I just want to mention a couple of things about, oh, that's what it looks like right now. And has for 25 years. It hasn't changed. A couple of things that I want to mention about the subdivision is that it is, of course, contingent upon the rezone. If the rezone is denied, the subdivision is also denied. If the rezone is approved, then they need to comply with MR20 zoning standards and subdivision requirements. Currently, the subdivision that they have, the plat that they have provided does not meet setbacks, and it does not meet open space requirements, but it can be conditioned to do so. Whether it's possible or not is unknown, but yeah. So you want, and I'm happy to answer questions pertaining to all that. The first one is that you would like me to what?
Well, there were some specific reasons that the proponent gave during their presentation about why they wanted this to happen.
Correct. I will say first and foremost, their reasons were self-serving. And you were given many pages of their reasons. It has to do, and I'm not a pro with this, but it has to do with lending, selling, marketing, receiving, what is it called? It has to do, like their insurance isn't being worked out as nicely as they could, or because of how it was 25 years ago. But in talking with staff and talking amongst us, this was a group decision. It's less important, really. I mean, we want to be community. We want to be good citizens and care for each other and all of that. But this is what they had 25 years ago. They could have done much more than that. They chose not to.
Yeah.
One of the planning commission members pointed out that 2 of the owners were owners at the time of choosing the condominium over a legal subdivision. They've got a private road going down the center. So in staff's view, there are humane reasons to consider, but in a zoning perspective, in a best planning perspective, is upzoning something that we intentionally downzoned the right decision to make. So our recommendation is to not move forward with a rezone, as is PC's, but there are a lot of personal factors for the 4 owners that may differ, that do differ, or they wouldn't be here. Yes.
All right, I understand a condominium, I understand a subdivision. Why, I mean, if the problem is to change it from a subdivision, excuse me, from a condominium to a subdivision, can't that be done as a legal transition without creating this upzone to 20 units? I mean, that's 2 different issues.
They'd still have to meet the maximum density, and I think they would exceed that unless they get the upzone. Is that
your question?
Not really. I mean, what I heard in the dialogue is that the problem is that it's currently a condominium.
Yes.
Where they don't own the land. I don't understand that. But they should have a common share of the land. I mean, as a condominium.
They didn't do that, though. They own the building. They don't own the land. It's one
That's
parcel.
crazy. I don't know how they get a loan on that. But anyway.
So who owns the land currently?
4 different owners. One person since '94 owns 2 of the buildings, and then one person owns each of the other 3.
But who owns the land? Like, are there individual owners who own the condos in the?
Association, the HOA.
The HOA owns the land, okay.
I don't think there's any stomach in this group to make an upzone, meaning to go to 20, almost doubling the density. But why can't they solve their problem by changing it from a condominium to a
Because
subdivision?
I do believe they don't qualify for setbacks.
They don't.
To be able to subdivide.
Well, then that's a
They can't
variance or something.
subdivide because of the setbacks. Right, that's correct.
So the subdivision would create like wholly owned townhomes as opposed to a condo? Like, are these all just two-story units, or
No,
is
it's
there
just
one
a
on top of
building.
the other?
You just, somebody owns the whole building.
Someone owns the whole building right
But
now.
there's 4 units in each building, correct?
Yeah, but
So the individual, that
you had building A,
it's a
Tom had
condominium building, gotcha.
Yeah.
But they
Not,
could
not
take one
4
unit.
individual units within the building.
Yeah. They could take 1 unit out, make it a double, and then you'd only have 16 units per acre.
Well, where were you 2 months ago?
I'm just like going, well, you could just like take one of the units in each building
Well,
and make it into
If
2.
it
but
was if there were 16 units on there, they would just do this legally.
yeah,
That is
Well, that's,
correct.
yeah. So you could just like take some of the
But
singles,
they're
turn
not
them,
willing to do that.
turn them into doubles, and then you can subdivide
Yes,
it. So
yes. And their attorney probably did come up with that, I'd imagine, you would think.
you never know.
We've talked to them many times.
Fresh eyes looking at them. So yeah.
Any other questions?
Planning Commission
Is there intent?
unanimously denied, correct?
Yes, they unanimously denied it.
Is there intent to tear down these structures and build a new whole construction thing?
They
claim
said
no.
no.
They claim no.
Well, how are they going to do the, anyway, that's, it's very confusing. Doesn't
And
make
they
sense.
It's very, very confusing, and it has been, and you can get wrapped up into the emotional side of things, which we did not. We are taking it as a planner, looking at the zones, looking at the
It seemed
Pre-planning
like,
process.
and I think Planning Commission said it very well when they said it looks like spot zoning.
Well, it is. There's no question.
Well, I
about
mean,
Yeah.
you know, but they said this is very definition of spot zoning.
Yeah.
But when it was built, it was zoned for what they did.
Yeah,
But
and we
now
call-
it's changed.
We
You know,
call
so it's
that,
like
they're legally existing as they are.
Yeah.
It's legally existing non-conforming.
Great.
So if we did nothing, what would be their options?
They would carry on like they have for 25 years.
Yeah,
If you,
we're not changing anything.
no, if you approve the rezone, then they would do the paperwork and the legal pieces in order for them to take away the condominiumization and work out this plan that complies, no? Alrighty.
You had it.
Wherever that went, it's very similar to this.
So, to go back to earlier question of mine, would they redesign the site to have,
They claimed no, but they would have to work out setbacks. And the way they have it drawn right here, so they have a setback right here, they have a setback right here, they'd have to have, the way it's drawn wouldn't work. They would have to have the property line going right through the center so that they had a shared drive. There's a number of different factors that go into it.
That would have to happen after the conditional use, after the rezone even.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, the rezone is the very first thing.
so the setbacks aren't generally from the outside property, it's within the site?
So the only grandfathered setback would be the perimeter. That's the only grandfathered setback that
That
there would
makes
be,
a little
because that's
more
not possible. But the sides,
I think I've seen this before. I mean, somewhere, I hope I didn't design it, you know.
19. Yeah, so that,
And I know the Planning Commission discussed doing a deed restriction, but it was determined that that doesn't make sense for this, even if like a rezone with a deed restriction, that was something they discussed, okay.
you know, there are a couple of possibilities like that, but I think in the end, and Kimber was there and had a lot of input on this, in the end, their decision really was, they had this choice before. One of the owners has, two of the owners have been there the entire time. They've had the opportunity to do that. It's a lot of work for the city, a lot of work that goes in to do it now. Is that something that the city wants to take on? If I am saying that correctly. So this is challenging for me because this isn't my language with the lending and all of that. But they had the opportunity in '94 and several years after that. But then it has been downzoned for a reason since.
Reminds me of the RV park. Any further questions? Thank you, Tanya. We will mull it over and talk about it again in 2 weeks.
Yeah. Oh, I can't wait.
Yay!
You're not going to be here.
That's why I can't wait.
And now, finally, Yuchi gets to come up and talk to us about a solar opportunity. And I hope I said your name right.
Good evening.
Good evening.
So
It's nice to see you instead of just hear you. Last time we just heard you.
Right. For some of the presentations, I would prefer to stay with my computer. So if people have questions, I can pull up files quickly on the other screen. So this one today is seeking the adoption of the resolution for the authorizing Steel Solar 1B project transaction schedule. This is beginning with a study program in Plymouth, Box Elder County, 40 megawatt solar project. Originally, we have 8 members sign up. We are very conservative at time to take smaller steps to see how solar would work with our schedule. So we signed up 5 megawatt. And originally there are 8 members sign up, but in last meeting, UM's meeting, we know one of the members decided to drop off this project, so we have 5 megawatt spare. So UM's, this transaction is prorated that 5 megawatt to the rest of 7 members according to original share schedule. And so our subscription is increased from 5 megawatt to 5.747 megawatt. And I guess the schedule 1 shows the details. And in the Exhibit A, attached the transaction schedule agreement and mentioned the commercial operation date and the percentage share we have and unit price.
So didn't Mark say a few weeks ago, a month ago, that that project seemed to be stalled? So is it now moving forward on target?
Well, the Red Mesa is the one that was supposed to be, the 5 megawatts of Red Mesa was supposed to be coming online this summer, and they've had supply chain issues, and so that will not be ready for this summer. This is the second project that we're looking at. There is a third solar project that is the one that also has some battery option. So we've, sort of tentatively committed to 5 megawatts, of which 2.5 will have battery storage backup. So again, this one, we don't have a firm timeline on this one, do we, or do we?
The commercial operation time in the transaction schedule here mentioned is November May 31st, 2023 to December 31st, 2023. And the Red Mesa, that's a good point that you brought up. Yes, so far we signed up 3 different solar projects. Red Mesa is the first one we signed up. It has about 49.5-ish total megawatt. Yes, and there are 15 members signed up for that one. And I think currently the developers talking about the COVID effect. So some of the solar panels were delayed, could not be delivered on time. Originally, the project supposed to be online July 2022 this year, but currently says it will be in December of this year. But whether or not that can be realized is to be seen. But they are declaring the kind of natural disaster force majeure. So they are trying to put in the proof to UAMPS members that there is such effect so that they do not get penalized. I think that's what you're talking about.
Okay.
And the Steel 2 project is in Box Elder County, really close to us. It's about a 30-minute drive from Brigham City, I think. So I noticed that there is a mention of option of UAMPS buyout of this project. If we have a members close to the project site, in case of buyout, then it would be beneficial to us if we have a member close to it, we designate that member to take care of the project for O&M and maintenance and operation maintenance.
Okay.
So, yeah, I think this Steel Solar called 1B project was originally Steel 2. And then now they combine the 2 projects and make the 2 stages to make the overall cost, especially for first stage, Steel 1 cost, a little less than what it was before.
Okay.
So the soonest power would be available from this is 14 to 20 months though, correct? 14 to 20 months would be the soonest that power could be potentially drawn from this project, correct? You said it's 2023 is when this might be completed?
2023, yes, from May to December.
Yeah,
That's
so,
what we
yeah, so
projected.
we're 14 to 20 months away from being able to, for it to be a power source.
Yeah, right now
it's
it's still in the study stage.
Yeah.
And I think stage 1 is already moved into the firm power, so it's ready to go. And this particular one, second stage, will be next year. Hopefully, by next summer, July, we can have some.
Well, that will be good.
Yeah.
So any further questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. See you again in 2 weeks. Or Mark. Are there any other considerations this evening? Okay, we will adjourn the Logan City Council and we will reconvene as the Logan Redevelopment Agency. We have 1 workshop item. Kurt?
What if it's legal to hit it once and just close and open at the same time?
Why does it bother you when someone
It'd
rings
be
the gavel?
so much more efficient.
It's so cool, though.
Do you have a mic, or just speak loud?
It's right in front of you.
So I see we have Marie Lafarge there in the back paying close attention to this.
You haven't been here with the new microphones? Oh, they're so good.
Still old school.
Oh, I know.
She's knitting.
I'm sorry, I couldn't resist. I've been seeing you working all the whole time. I was like, I can't wait till RDA and I
Happy?
can throw out the literary quip.
Happy hands or busy hands?
Did you drop a stitch? No.
Yeah. Happy hands or busy hands, right?
Oh, I like the Marie Lafarge quote. Reference.
I'll have to look that up.
Oh, my goodness, go ahead. please,
Okay,
Kurt.
two items tonight, budget adjustments. The first one's a request to appropriate $65,000 to relocate and reconstruct a new canal diversion. It's across 100 South from where that existing canal is. So this is between Main Street and 100 West. And that, the water diversion would provide water to the Ellen Eccles Theater to allow them to operate their cooling system. So the reason this is happening is because Mill Creek, phase 1 is now done, but phase 2 is ready to be constructed here pretty soon. And part of that construction will impact where the existing diversion is. And per a 1992 easement agreement that the city entered into, it's our obligation to fund the expense related to a relocation should that ever occur, which it is now. So that's that one. Any questions on that one?
1992.
30 years ago.
This is a good deal.
It's what?
This is a good deal.
Oh, I thought you said 92 was a good year.
No, I'm on the facilities board for this,
yeah.
and we worked through it, so the alternate is putting in a whole new cooling system.
Yeah, but I'm amazed that we said 1992 that we would pay for it whenever it happened.
I think that
I wasn't here.
Yeah.
I wasn't either.
I wasn't even born yet.
That's right.
Why are pants on fire?
Your kids weren't.
He can say that. I don't think we can say that.
I think the rationale, Jeannie, for that was, I mean, the ground is undeveloped, right? And that water pipe, distributing that water benefited the city because that was our building, the Ellen Eccles Theater. So. Okay, any questions?
No, we're good.
Second item is a budget adjustment that we're requesting to appropriate $2,150,000 in pledged donations for the center block plaza that Mayor Dane secured that are to go towards the plaza. This appropriation would allow for the funds to be applied as needed to the plaza project, but also any surplus, which we expect there would be some surplus, would then be in the RDA fund reserve that could then be deployed for whatever other RDA projects. So.
Now, wait a minute.
Thank you to
Wait a
our
minute.
generous donors.
But our generous donors gave for the plaza project, so we need to spend all of that money on the plaza project.
That's correct.
But any money we save on the remainder of the budget can
Comes
stay,
back to the RDA.
come back to the RDA. I
And
don't
this
want
money-
anybody to misunderstand that we're going to take part of the gift and put it back into the RDA. Correct. Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
So, so Rich, how much of a percentage of our budget is this donation?
Of the construction, roughly 50%, but other costs
Obviously, yeah, purchasing the property, but awesome. 50%, I am very happy with it.
Any other questions?
No. But can I clarify, Marie Lafarge was convicted of killing her husband with arsenic poisoning in France, and she knit through the trial. And that is the reference for Wendy sitting back there knitting. So that's the story. That's the backstory.
I was wondering about the assimilation of character.
Yeah.
I looked it up and I was confused.
She's not very nice. Hasn't killed Dennis yet? No.
Yet, being.
We're going to adjourn.
And don't put in minutes.
Shut this down.
But it was on